All right, Week 9 NFL Power Rankings. We're halfway through the season already. That's crazy. After this week, at least, we're halfway through the season. That's absolutely bizarre to me that we're already halfway through the season, but here we are. Things are starting to take shape. You can see where things are falling out and which teams are rising and falling. Things are leveling as well between the AFC and the NFC. There are now, last week it was 9 NFC teams above 500, now 7. 7-7. So each conference has 7-7, but one division in the NFC doesn't have a team above 500, so they steal one of the spots from somebody else. We'll see who's on the outside looking in, who's on the inside looking out. As a reminder for those on this channel, I always do my power rankings different than other places. My top 14, which is how many teams make the playoffs, my top 14 are always split evenly, 7 NFC, 7 AFC. And it doesn't always mean that's the best 14 teams, because usually 13 or 14 should be squeaked out by someone right on the outside. But that's what I do. 7 AFC, 7 NFC. It keeps it fair, keeps it clean with where teams are as we look at a playoff picture long term, as we look towards the playoffs. So I'll move me to the top here. Here's the NFL, NFC, AFC conference standings. I know that's really small on some of your screens. We'll fly through it quick, but you can see from top to bottom where each team ranks. And yes, over on the NFC, the Cardinals get the edge over the Niners because they have a head-to-head win, but they will still face off one time more during the year. You can see the Niners have a plus 28-point differential, and the Cardinals, negative 27, even though they're sitting in the 4 seed right now for the playoffs. So I think everyone knows, but your top 4 divisional winners are the ones who take the first 4 playoff spots, and then the best record from there will take 5, 6, and 7. I always do my biggest riser and farthest faller. It kind of gives a sneak peek into the rankings. It gives a little spoiler, but after the Browns' big win, and they've been really close in some tight games, and I kind of thought teams were playing weak against them, but it's more of them playing really well against other teams, and then Jameis Winston change at quarterback might be the shift they need for this team to really make an adjustment. I'm not saying they're headed towards the playoffs, but they're definitely out of the gutter, so I raised them 6 spots. And the Seahawks on the other side, I think I got a little too hyped about them winning a couple in a row. It was against inferior opponents, so it wasn't really warranted yet, but I bumped them into the playoff rankings because, again, someone from the NFC West has to make the playoffs, and the Niners were free-falling with all their injuries. I knocked them out. Well, the Niners clearly look better this week, and the Seahawks looked way worse. I thought they'd at least have a competitive game against the Bills. That was terrible. So back down to earth, back down to reality. The Seahawks, the pigeons of the sea, are back down into the non-playoff rankings, and I have to adjust them accordingly because until they fix that defense, they really don't have a lot, in my opinion, that warrants them being even close to a verge playoff team. So we'll put me right up here in the top corner here where it's easier for you guys to see the rankings they go along. We'll get started. Number 32, the Panthers looked good for 1 turnover and 1 drive. Bryce Young even looked like he has potential in redemption, but that didn't last long. They're bad. They're just really bad. Panthers might have a shot this week as they host the battered-up Saints in Week 9. The Titans don't look good no matter who's at quarterback. The defense keeps them in games, but unless they can do something on offense, they're going to end up with the number 1 overall pick. The Titans host the powerhouse matchup against the Patriots. Titans-Patriots this week in Week 9. The Raiders are next. Minshew Mania gave the Raiders a glimmer of hope of repeating an upset against the Chiefs. The last loss the Chiefs had 300 and something days ago, but that faded quickly. How is this the same team that beat the Ravens? I have no clue. The Raiders head to Cincinnati to try to snap that skid. The Giants look like a team with promise when you watch them play. The defense is okay. The offense can get rolling, but they just keep shooting themselves in the foot over and over and over again. They host the Commanders this week in Week 9. Patriots need to win against the Jets. Even with it, they're the second most lopsided in scoring differential this year, but they played well enough to give me a glimmer of hope about them. The Pats head to Tennessee to take on the Titans this week. And the Jets, drama, underperforming, excuses, Aaron Rodgers, coaches, firings, not sure what else you can say on this one. They host the Texans this week to get back on track, and I'm not sure if they ever will. The Dolphins lost in the last second to the Cardinals, so I'm not going to drop them down with the underperforming teams below them, not looking any better. But Tua coming back needs to have a bigger impact and better results moving forward for them to stay in the rankings or to move up. The Dolphins head to Buffalo this week. How good can the Brownies be with Jameis Winston under center? I just mentioned them earlier. People quickly forget the gunslinger is one of only 8 quarterbacks that have thrown for 5,000 yards in a season. Probably because they forget that because they come with so many interceptions, about as many as touchdowns. The Browns get to host the Chargers this week. The Saints have lost 6 in a row and don't seem like they have an answer. They head on the road to take on the Panthers this week. We'll see if they can get things fixed. The Jaguars are so close to looking like a decent team. I honestly think they give up in the middle of games. They need to figure something out quickly if they don't want to keep moving down the list. They'll have to head to Philly to face a tough Eagles team. That won't be easy. The Cowboys tried to mount a comeback, had me believing they might be turning the corner. That was the first loss on the road this year. They'll need to get back on the road winning ways this week against the Falcons if they want any shot of hanging around in a tough divisional race. The Pigeons of the Sea had me convinced they had a shot against the Bills. Just like I mentioned earlier, they proved to me I was right about them in the beginning of the season, but I wasn't right about them last week. They'll have to face the Rams a week after they looked playoff ready this week. The Bengals needed to win against the Eagles. I honestly thought that they would be a competitive game. They ended up losing by 20 in a game they were favored in. Not a good look for a team that's trying to establish its identity. The Bengals host the Raiders in Week 9. I had to jump the Rams up in the rankings after a huge win versus the Vikings. They have a huge opportunity to continue to climb, and keep climbing with games against the Seahawks, Dolphins, and Patriots coming up next. The Rams head to Seattle to see if they can continue building some of that momentum. The Bucs are headed in the wrong direction after losing some key playmakers. They've already been swept by the Falcons for the season, so it's going to be an uphill battle to win the division. Now in a division that likely only has one team making the playoffs. The Buccaneers have to face the Chiefs on Monday night this week in Kansas City. Oof. The Colts are sitting right where they ended last season after losing to the Texans just like they did at the end of the last season. On the outside looking in, a lot of close games. Let's see if that helps prepare them for a tough stretch coming up. They get a tough matchup against the Vikings on Sunday Night Football this week. Cardinals are flying high after winning 3 of their last 4. They're rising the rankings quickly, but have to face some tough defense gut checks for the next few weeks before they get a bye. The Cardinals host the Bears, and the Bears are my only non-playoff team to have a winning record. At 4-3, they're definitely the verge playoff team. But after that horrific ending against the Commanders, they need to be put in timeout, just like Tyreek Stevenson should be put in timeout for at least a week. Now the Bears travel to Phoenix for a matchup against the Cardinals. So those are my Let's back this up just a little bit. All right, there's the bottom 18, getting to the top 14. All right, the Chargers are the typical team that I literally don't want. I don't know what I'm getting from week to week, and I know it's going to look like when I see them. I just don't know with them. One week they'll look like a hot mess, like last week against the Cardinals. The next week they'll look like they're formidable. The Saints on Sunday this last week. But, I mean, that was the Saints. They're going to have a more difficult schedule coming up than they've had, so it'll be a good gauge to see who they really are when they face the Ravens, Bengals, Falcons, and Chiefs. But before then, they get to head to Cleveland to take on the Browns. A team off a big win. The Falcons, the division-leading Falcons, boast an impressive -1 point differential. Yes, a 5-3 team, they're being outscored by their opponents. Now, that being said, there is something to say about teams that hang close and squeak out some wins when they need to. A very favorable matchup coming up for the Falcons. They head as they lead their division since they already swept their only real competition, the Buccaneers, for the season series. They get the Cowboys this week for the Dirty Birds schedule. The Niners. I'm admitting that I panicked a little bit too early on the Niners after watching the Seahawks get demolished and the Niners handle the Cowboys for most of the game. I have a few doubts about the Niners. I believe they'll win the NFC North easily and make the playoffs. How good they'll look heading into the playoffs, though, that's the real question. They get a bye this week. The Packers, 6-2 is nothing to scoff at. And while it's not always pretty, Matt LaFleur has definitely developed a system of culture of winning, even with a pair of subpar quarterbacks. That means something, especially for a team that's won 4 in a row and continues to look better and better, especially on defense with a new defensive coordinator. How they'll look against actual competition is the real question, though. That'll soon be answered as they face the Lions, Bears, and Niners next. They host the Lions this week. So we'll see if they're frauds or not. I've really made them out to be, and I really think they are. Okay, Eagles, we see you. Winners of 3 in a row. And that last loss was to a really good Buccaneers team before they were banged up. I've been critical of the Eagles so far. I wasn't sure if they had a hangover after having too close of games with subpar teams like the Packers, Saints, and Browns. But it's time to give them some credit after they've been putting some pressure on and starting to dominate. I think they've turned the corner. They're starting to look like first half of the 2023 season Eagles again. They host the Jaguars this week in their first big bump up in the rankings. Weren't the Broncos supposed to be a team fighting for or losing for the number 1 overall pick. I wouldn't call their win over the Panthers dominant or super impressive, but they continue to steadily get the job done. A winning record 9 weeks into the season is something very few people saw, and I have to say I'm thoroughly entertained by them. Few people realize it, but Bo Nix has put up better numbers than Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels, number 1 and number 2 overall quarterback picks, in the month of October. We'll see if he continue that against the Ravens team that's going to want to prove themselves after losing last week. The Broncos head to Baltimore for a true test of where this team stands moving forward. The 2 tough ones in a row for the Vikings, but against quality competition. The Vikings look like they lost that killer edge and are on the verge of collapse that no skullhead wants to see. 5-0 won't mean much if they can't regain their killer edge and put themselves back in contention for the division after losing all the momentum to the Lions. The Colts have played close in every game, almost every game they've been in. Don't expect this to be a cakewalk, even though they get a chance to redeem themselves in front of their hometown Minnesota crowd on Sunday Night Football to try to right that ship. All right, the Steelers I didn't move in the rankings, even though they won. We're used to the Steelers making the playoffs on their defense alone. The defense definitely won the day yet again last night, but it was a little closer than I would have liked it to have been because the offense wasn't the same as it was the week before. It had a hard time getting clicking. I would like to see that consistently. A few weeks ago, there was a quarterback turmoil in Pittsburgh. Now there seems to be a clear path to the playoffs with Russell Wilson under center and even a playoff run. 3 wins in a row is a nice place to be for a team heading into their bye week. Little R&R will be good for a team with some major testing teams coming up after their bye. All right, the Ravens are going to be next at 6. What the crap are we going to see out of the Ravens any given week? They're either super dominant or they're losing to teams that are fighting for the number 1 overall pick. Like, seriously, what the crap is going on with that? Right after I had just put them in the top, ready to make a run at the Chiefs. Whatever, I guess we'll see this week. The Ravens host the overperforming Broncos that we just talked about at home this week. So that'll be a fun matchup. I think the Ravens should handle that one pretty easily, but we'll see. All right. Number 5 is going to be the Commanders. All hail the Commanders. A walk-off miracle win has the Commanders staying atop the division, riding another winning streak, 6-2 overall. New ownership, new culture, overhauled roster. It all seems to be paying off for Josh Harris as the turnaround looks not only to be headed towards change, but a front-runner to make the playoffs. I have them ranked as the second best NFC team after they proved they can grind out a win in any form or shape, even against tough defenses. The Commanders get a divisional match first versus last this week as they head on the road to take on the Giants. All right, the Bills have won 3 in a row again, but the adage about beating quality competition might just start coming into play. Their only losses have come against their toughest competition, and their wins have come against inferior opponents. Quality win on the road against the Seahawks last week was a big step forward for that. That was a tough road win to show the Bills are a serious team. The Bills get a divisional match against the Dolphins this week. All right, the Texans are back to their winning ways, and I'm going to admit that I'm worried they are being ranked way too high here on my rankings. I really probably should put them down a little bit. I feel like the Texans are about to fall flat on their face. Being ranked 3rd with a plus 9-point differential doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies, and nor should it for the Texans, but 5 of their next 6 games are against teams with losing records as well. Feels like a prime opportunity for a good team to fine-tune those weaknesses and really become elite again. So that's why I think they're really going to be cream of the crop here at the top, because the next 6 weeks should give them a good opportunity to really separate themselves and fine-tune that stuff. They've been showing and become the 3rd best team. At least that's how I feel about it. The Texans are on the road to face the Jets this week. They're going to have a tough matchup against the Lions very soon, so we'll see as that comes along. All right, number 2, I'm going to preface it because I said that the Chiefs would not lose or be their number 1 or be thrown from number 1. I've changed my mind. The Chiefs look on any given week like they're going to be upset, and I just don't feel confident that they're the dominant number 1 anymore. They could regain the number 1 back, and it probably isn't fair that I move them down, but squeaker victories against inferior teams don't have me convinced right now that they're going to be a 3-peat. As I think about the Super Bowl, I don't see them winning it, so I can't have them at number 1. The Chiefs get to host the Buccaneers for Monday Night Football this week. And at number 1, the Lions look like that dominant team that no team wants to face right now. They make winning look effortless, and I can't find a chink in their armor. Offense, defense, special teams, coaching, line, trenches, Defensive backs, wide receivers, every specialty position. I honestly don't know if they'll lose again, except for maybe to the Bears. And the entire rest of the season or in the playoffs. The Lions head to Lambeau to face the division rival Packers as a highlight to Week 9. That should be the biggest game of the week, but I really think it's going to be a blowout by the Lions. I don't think the Packers stand an absolute chance against them this week. It'll be interesting to see, though. All right. Oop, moved the wrong thing. Sorry. So that's Week 9 rankings. New videos come out each Tuesday for the Power Rankings. Each Wednesday, I give my weekly predictions. Give me your thoughts on which rankings I got right, which ones I got wrong, which ones I'm way off on. Packers fans, always give me your thoughts because you think your team is God walking on water when they're frauds of the frauds. See what happens. But we have placed things. I feel pretty good about these rankings. I think they're really in the place where they should be, other than a couple of the Texans I've really overhyped, but they're coming up on 5 out of 6 really easy games. So I think they'll earn that third spot. We'll see. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments, though. I do appreciate you guys tuning in. If you don't mind hitting the like button, and if you haven't subscribed, please do so. It helps with the algorithm, helps me get the channel out and the video out a little bit more. I do appreciate it. Good luck to your teams, and we'll see you next week.